What's up, LFA TV? I appreciate all you for being here with me on this beautiful August 21st, Thursday, 2025 live transmission. We had a minor technical difficulty, but we worked it out. Everything is good to go, and we're so thankful for all of you being here live. We got a stacked show lined up for you today, and wow, we have been seeing a number of great things take shape with the Trump administration. What's been going on in terms of what you guys saw with the federal district court ruling in favor of Trump, dropping off this $500 million BS position suit by Letitia James. And if you haven't seen, she tried to come out afterwards and claim a number of crazy things. And we'll be paying attention to that. And it's like she can't get her hands off of Trump. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is what she said. She came out with a statement about this. If you haven't seen it yet, chat. She said this. She said the first department today affirmed the well-supported finding in the trial court. Donald Trump, his company, and his two children are liable for fraud. The court upheld the injunctive relief we won, limiting Donald Trump and the Trump Organization officers' ability to do business in New York. She said it should not be lost to history. Yet another court has ruled that the president violated the law and that our case has merit. Okay. What judge did that? A woke one? Right? One of these agenda-driven judges, of course. And then she says, we will seek appeal to the Court of Appeals and continue to protect the rights and interests of New Yorkers. To which I replied to that. I said, let me finish off your quote and clean it a little bit. Quote, behind bars, signed AG Letitia James, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's such a great thing for this to have taken shape, but I think it's also incredible for us to see how this plays out against somebody like this, who actually is the person who commits fraud and crime in terms of her, I guess, movements and actions that she took to obtain loans fraudulently. But yeah, she wants to flip the script and call Trump the criminal in this whole situation. So it's quite wild to see. And I'm glad that this came out and is going to work against her. The very thing that she's trying to hold against him is going to be held against her. So first and foremost, everybody, what is up? Elijah Fire, Patriotic Lady, Carl, PA Cat Lady, Miss One Bears, Jose, what's going on? Sassy Lady, Lucy Be Gone, Bad Moon, Bobby Driver, and everybody else popped into the chat. All 1,200 of you guys live on Rumble. Thank you for being here with me. If you are new to the Vantes Point, I am the host, Joey Vantes. I'm here Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on LFA TV. And you can always pop over to our site, lfatv.us, and you can check out all of our great information, news articles, and posts, along with the store. You can donate directly from there. And if you have issues, you can click up on the upper right-hand corner of the screen to watch LFA TV live directly from there. On my website, joeyvantes.com, you can also click on the direct link there on the picture for the Vantes Point and get the alternative stream on YouTube. But we welcome you everywhere you might be, whether you're watching on X, Facebook, Instagram, whether you're watching right here on Rumble. We greatly appreciate you. The great part about being on Rumble, as I've always mentioned, you can tap in directly into the chat and become part of our family. We want you to be here, and we're so grateful for each and every one of you contributing and supporting in every way that you do. Now, tonight as we pop into this, I got a story that every American parent needs to hear. It's horrifying, it's enraging, and it's a direct consequence of Democrat open border policies, right? And their continued effort to create these sanctuary cities for these illegal aliens, including those like this gentleman, this MS-13 gang member who's just been sentenced to a 52-year prison sentence after a brutal attack on a 15-year-old boy in New York just last January. And the details about this whole thing are absolutely chilling, okay? Prosecutors say that this thug, kidnapped a small boy, 15 years old, smashed his skull in with a brick, proceeded to stab him in the neck, and then left him for dead. And if it wasn't for an innocent bystander, somebody who was watching, basically an angel, if you will, who saw him, they wouldn't have been able to save this kid's life. And this incident didn't happen, this MS-13 gang member. This didn't take place in El Salvador. This wasn't some war zone, right, in Afghanistan or overseas. This was an American neighborhood. And the boy was just 15 years old. He was targeted, he was brutalized, and he was discarded like a piece of garbage. And doctors said it was a miracle that he survived altogether. And yet, the media barely covered this. Why? Because it blows a hole right through their narrative that illegal immigration is all about dreamers and families just looking for a better life, as they suggest, right? This wasn't a dreamer. This was an absolute nightmare. And MS-13 isn't new, right? This gang, born in the streets of LA, fueled by El Salvador Civil War refugees, has grown into one of the most violent transnational gangs in the entire world. And they're known for machetes, right? They're bricks, knives, you name it, right? And not just killing, but absolutely torturing victims. And their motto literally translates to kill, rape, control. That's their motto. And the ugly truth about all this is that this MS-13 gang thrives because Democrats refuse to shut the back door. They always have, they always will. And they've made our border into a revolving door before Tom Homan came in and basically closed it. And so at the end of the day, Trump has made this a top priority to crack down on these types of individuals. He's given ICE and Border Patrol the green light to, get and collect these individuals and escort them outside of our country, boot them out. We're watching in D.C. as the federal crackdown is in place and they're cleaning up the streets. This is setting an example for the rest of the nation. But with respect to this young boy and his story, this is the story behind it. Watch this.
This MS-13 gang member, who's also in this country illegally, will spend 52 years now in prison for a near fatal attack at Pilgrim Psychiatric Center. Yasin Chavez Campos is the last of 7 men convicted of kidnapping a 15-year-old, then beating him last January. Prosecutors say the group hit the teen with a brick, stabbed him in the neck, then left him for dead. When they came back to bury the victim, he was gone.
And it was only by the grace of God that he had the fortitude to not only regain consciousness, but get out, because they were coming back to finish the job.
Prosecutors say a Good Samaritan took the teen to the hospital. Chavez Campos is expected to be deported by ICE once he completes his sentence.
Absolutely wild. And look, I mean, got to pause for a second there. I don't know if you guys noticed the same thing I did, but the guy reporting on this story, is it just me or did he look like the gang member's dad? I'm sorry. He just looks so similar to him, his facial structure and whatnot. I had to do a double take in this, but back to business here. I mean, this case is absolutely horrifying. But let's be honest, chat. This is not an isolated incident. We've seen MS-13 gang members arrested for killing high school students in Long Island. We've seen girls trafficked and branded like cattle. We've seen parents, right, bury their children because of these gang members who should have never entered into this country to begin with. But every time, Democrats downplay it. They say it's rare. They say, at the end of the day, hey, look, it's good for the country. Well, tell that to one of the parents who have lost their children. Tell that to the boy who barely survived this instance. And the bottom line is, this is what the Democrat Party is all about, and this is why it needs to be completely torn down and destroyed, burned to the ground. They open the border. They protect the criminals. They sacrificed your children and your family's safety for their political power. And unless America wakes up during these last 3.5 years, unless we put leadership back in place, put our families before these gangs, especially with the midterms coming up, these stories are just going to keep coming back in. And that's the reality of how all of this stuff works. Now, as we pivot, I've seen some strange things in politics, right? But I think this one kind of takes the cake here. This one kind of opened my eyes a little bit. This is a real eye-opener, chat, if you will. Okay? There's a robot. Yeah, an absolute robot walking around that looks exactly like Joe Biden. I mean, if you strip off the skin, you strip off the suit, and the creepy smile, and the sniffs of children, same shuffle, same pace, same blank stare into the abyss. I'm not kidding. Check this out for yourself. I mean, it's absolutely wild. Check this out. I mean, come on. Can you tell the difference? Can you guys tell the difference in the chat? Please help me out here. I mean, I couldn't tell the difference just watching it. And honestly, some people are really saying, hey, there is no difference. I mean, if you watch them in lockstep with each other, it is absolutely on point, which raises the question, have we already been watching a robot the entire time that Joe was in office? And where is Joe, by the way? Because let's be real, right? The slurred words, the confused wandering, the random handshakes with invisible people, that's either a glitch in the software or somebody forgot to update the firmware. I mean, if we're being real about it. And I mean, look, what's next? They're going to roll them out with a charging station next to the, any one of the next addresses that he's going to make to one of his foundations that continues to siphon money from the U.S. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious. And I think the ex-president needs a reboot. And the reality is, it is quite scary because it is a very real possibility with all things that we've seen. I would not put it past these insane maniacs to enact something like this. I think it would have been absolutely right within their wheelhouse to do so. Now, there's some details on Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs that you should know about.
Hey everyone, it's Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs. This week, Donald Trump said he wanted to sign an executive order banning mail-in ballots. Voting by mail is a trusted, secure tradition of our democracy, used by more than 75% of Arizonans and millions of Americans across the country. In 2020, as Secretary of State, I delivered a historically safe election and defended Arizonans' right to vote in the dangerous aftermath of the big lie. Voting by mail is safe and secure, full stop. As governor, I'll always stand up to this attack on Arizonans' freedoms and always fight to protect vote by mail, ensuring that every eligible Arizonan can make their voice heard.
So here we are, guys. Arizona, ground zero for election corruption in America. And who's standing guard at the fraud factory? We got none other than Cartel Katie Hobbs, right? Hobbs, who rigged her own election as Secretary of State and then crowned herself governor, is now demanding that mail-in ballots continue. And calling Trump and Kari Lake's push for election investigations. And basically, we know she called them the big lie. And if we unpack that, Katie Hobbs has declared this week, as we go through all of this, that mail-in voting is a critical way, she says, for Americans to make their voices heard in elections. And then she accused Trump of attacking voting rights and promised to protect these mail-in ballots here in Arizona. So it sounds noble, right? Until you remember the facts. The facts that in 2020, tens of thousands of ballots were actually mailed without any chain of custody, right? We can talk about ballots showing up at addresses where registered voters hadn't lived in years, sometimes in over a decade. Dead voters were still receiving these mail-in ballots. Maricopa County officials basically stonewalled every attempt at any transparency. And then in 2022, it got even worse. On Election Day, over 60% of polling places in Maricopa County had tabulators fail. And so voters were turned away, told to just go somewhere else. And then chain of custody documents, again, were incomplete and absolutely missing. And so Katie Hobbs here, Cartel Katie, as Secretary of State, refused to recuse herself from overseeing her own election. That's like being a referee and a player in the same game and then telling everyone who complains about it it's just a big lie. Right? And so let's be clear about this. Mail-in voting isn't about convenience, it's about control. Because these ballots eliminate the secure chain of custody. They allow ballots to sit in drop boxes and post offices and apartment lobbies. That's what they do. They're harvested, they've been trafficked, and then exploited. And we've seen the videos. We've seen the late night deliveries. We've seen the mules stuffing these drop boxes in the dead of the night. And that's not democracy. That's organized fraud. And so Cartel Katie wants it to continue. And then now let's compare that with Trump and Kari Lake, right? Trump isn't attacking voting rights. He's demanding that legal votes actually count. He's saying what every honest American already knows. You should vote in person. You should show your ID. You should have one vote, one person, one day. Kari Lake has been relentless in exposing Arizona's fraud machine as well. She's not backing down about it. And neither has Trump. And yet Hobbs calls this a big lie. No, Cartel Katie. That's not the case here. Look, the big lie is pretending that Arizona elections were clean. Well, every single piece of evidence says otherwise, and it's been proven. And by the way, did anyone catch Hobbs' delivery here? Did you guys catch that? Watching her talk about protecting democracy is like watching a raccoon lecture you on a trash can security machine. I mean, look, seriously, if we're looking at this, Cartel Katie talking about election integrity, that's like Hunter Biden giving a speech on sobriety. Okay? And the deeper truth in all this is that Democrats can't win without cheating. The people of Arizona, in my state, aren't buying what they're selling, and neither should people across America as a whole. We don't want open borders. We don't want fentanyl pouring across the United States. They don't want their elections rigged. So what do Democrats do? Continually. They manipulate the system with these mail-in ballots. They stretch the election day into election month. They create so much chaos at the end of the day that the fraud becomes impossible to track, and that's how it works out. And so Cartel Katie is their front woman for the whole operation. And that's why she's Cartel Katie. Okay? Cartel Katie, and we've seen her play out this system over and over and over again, and I'm glad that it's finally coming to a headway where it is being attacked the way that it necessarily needs to be done. Chat, what says you about this? What do you guys think about all this? Let me know. I mean, it's just quite insane through and through. And I mean, we can even go a little bit deeper. We can talk about the Kari Lake situation. I mean, there's been so much corruption in Arizona as a whole. We can talk about the fact that Kari Lake, remember when she had the recorded phone call with Jeff DeWitt being the GOP leader, basically coming off as trying to bribe her through the cartels and various politicians at the federal level for Kari Lake to basically step down and not run. Then obviously we saw her run, lose. Then somebody else came in by the name of Swoboda, who is the GOP leader in the state of Arizona, but aligns herself very much so with Katie Hobbs and these other people. She got flipped, probably got some money somewhere along the line, and now she's doing her thing with respect to that. So we're seeing that happen. I mean, it's no mistake that these things are happening. But I think there's just corruption across the board from state and federal level, and this is the type of stuff that must be attacked with all ferociousness. It needs to be attacked with all severity. That's what needs to happen here. It's quite crazy. So let's pivot here for just a second. County, Florida, shows exactly why parents are no longer trusting in the education system. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. A teacher in the Alachua County School District has been placed on leave after she nominated one of her own conservative students as most likely to become a dictator, chat. Okay, are you hearing this? This is crazy, right? And you heard me exactly right. Because the student held conservative views, his own teacher tried to brand him as yet a future tyrant, public humiliation right in front of his classroom, in front of his peers, and a scarlet letter for daring to think differently. Now, here's where this thing gets serious, right? Florida's Department of Education is sanctioning the teacher's license, and according to the letter obtained by Florida's Voice, the sanctions could range from reprimand, fine, probation, and even restriction of scope of practice, suspension of up to 5 years, revocation up to 10 years, or even permanent revocation of her educator license. So in other words, this teacher may never step foot into a classroom again. And Florida's Attorney General, James Utmeyer, also has weighed in demanding the teacher's termination, and he made it clear. He said, listen, if you're labeling, mocking, or targeting kids for political views, it's not just inappropriate, it's absolutely abusive. And so Florida's classrooms are not supposed to be a place of education, are supposed to be a place of education, not indoctrination. And that's exactly what took place here. So now that we step back and think about how the culture that creates this, right? If a conservative teacher were to mock a liberal student, call them most likely to riot, most likely to join Antifa, you know exactly what would happen, chat. National outrage. There would be CNN, 24/7 wall-to-wall coverage, lawsuits, panels, immediate firings. But when you target a conservative kid, suddenly it's a joke. Suddenly it's brushed off as this harmless situation. This is the double standard. This is the hypocrisy the left constantly screams about bullying, safe spaces, but the moment the student dares to challenge the progressive system, this whole narrative, the bullying comes from the teachers themselves. And the scandal didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, it comes on the heels of Florida's multi-year fight to take back classrooms from the ideological capture. We're talking about parental rights in the Education Act, right? Stopping gender identity and sexual orientation indoctrination in lower grades. Book content reviews, keeping pornography and radical materials out of the school libraries. We can talk about anti-DEI measures, removing these, race-based indoctrination aspects and triggers from the higher education standard. And Governor Ron DeSantis and Education Commissioner Stacey Kumastis has basically made it clear. They said Florida's classrooms are for math, for science, they're for reading, them for history, not for teachers to push their personal politics. And so this Alachua County teacher just proved why reforms are absolutely necessary. And let's pause here, right? Because the irony is painful, okay? The teacher labeled the conservative student most likely to become dictator, but who's acting like the dictator here? Right? The student was simply expressing conservative views. The teacher used her power to publicly shame him, to control the speech, and to stamp out dissent. That is not democracy whatsoever. That is authoritarianism. And it's coming from the very people who pretend to guard against it. And the fact that she's saying this person's going to be the most, possible to become a dictator, I mean, that was a dictatorial move right there. And this isn't an isolated case. This is across America. Conservative students have been dragged through the mud on this, docked grades for refusing to use preferred pronouns, punished for wearing these pro-life shirts, suspended for refusing to mask up when mandates fell, and so silenced for even quoting the Bible in essays. And the message is clear in all this. If you think independently, if you reject the left script, you will be targeted. And here in Florida, finally, as we see in what I'm about to show you, finally, we're seeing some real pushback. And this is what makes this case different. In California, the teacher would have been protected. In New York, they probably would have promoted her. In Florida, she's on leave, her license being sanctioned, and she could basically end her own career. And that's the accountability parents have been demanding for. This is the culture war in real time. And on one side, parents, want to see these leaders actually bring safety to schools and bring an environment where their kids can learn and grow and express themselves in this way. Neutral places of learning, if you will. And on the other hand, these activists in the classrooms who treat conservative students as enemies to be humiliated. And the truth is, you cannot raise a generation of free Americans if the classrooms are run like thought police stations. And so we'll see how this all plays out. But I want to show you this video right now so you can see this for yourself. Watch this.
My son, 6 years old, was prohibited from sitting next to his friend on the school bus because a parent objected to my perspectives on book challenges. My older son's history teacher allowed students to label him a Nazi-phile simply for his interest in history and participation in ROTC. She later nominated my son as the most likely to become a dictator and had his classmates vote on it and try to force him to the front of the class to receive the certificate, which he rightly refused, all because of his conservative values and our perspectives.
Thank you. James.
Is the continued divide between Trump and the Federal Reserve putting us behind the curve again? Can the Fed take action at the right time, or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? And what does this mean for your savings? Consider diversifying with gold through Birch Gold Group. For decades, gold has been viewed as a safe haven in times of economic stagnation, global uncertainty, and high inflation. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you have an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or just buy some gold to keep in your safe. But first, get educated. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. Just text the name Vantes, V-A-N-T-E-S, to the number 989898. Again, text VANTES to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Fed can't stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead for yourself.
All right, LFA TV members, thank you so much for joining with me here today. And speaking of gold and Birch Gold, We've actually got Philip with us, joining us today from Birch Gold Group. They are the most trusted source in protecting your savings with gold and precious metals. A great partner of mine. I believe in what they do personally, and that's why I want to share this segment with you because, look, a lot of people right now are worried about the economy. They're worried about the dollar and their retirement. So I want to bring in an expert to really break this down in plain English for the LFA TV members. So, Philip, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. And Philip, as we dive into this, you're the expert with respect to Birch Gold and what Birch Gold does. And so I want to address a couple of things here for my audience to really understand how this works. And I guess the first part of that is the why. Why are so many people turning to gold right now? What's really driving that interest from your perspective?
It's a great question. The answer is broadly speaking, the economy. There are so many drivers for precious metals right now. So look at what we've got in front of us, right? We have potential recession on the horizon. We've got inflation, which has been rising again. I think with tariffs, it could go up a little bit further. It's very sticky for the Fed. And then you mentioned, I think, the big one a moment ago, which is currency or dollar devaluation, currency concerns. These problems, they're an issue for people who sit in cash or sit in financial markets, but they drive gold and silver up. Precious metals, gold and silver are safe haven assets. So when the dollar comes down, when inflation goes up, or we see big recessions, these things do really well. It's why they're up about 30% this year. Look at the last really big recession in '08. Gold and silver doubled in value. Add in today, de-dollarization, central banks around the world dumping the dollar, it starts to create a really good argument for gold. And actually, central banks, largely driving its growth, have set records for gold buying for the last 3.5 years consistently. So it's the perfect storm for gold.
That's phenomenal. And I think I've seen some of the numbers suggest in the last 12 months, they say gold has probably gone up about 40%. And so that's exponential. That's phenomenal. And so I guess pivoting from that, let's talk about the how, right? For someone who's brand new to this, how easy is it to actually purchase gold and get started with Birch Gold Group?
So the answer is very easy. We're big on information, right? So for all your viewers and anyone out there, we have free information. Get educated, because I think with good grounding and education in the matter, you can make good decisions. But from there, it's very simple. They can contact us directly. They'll have access to somebody like me. We can help guide them through the why and then also the how. But they can purchase either, people have cash sitting in a bank account. It's losing to inflation today. We can take physical precious metals, ship it to them. They can hold on to it. Or for those who prefer, they can have it stored in a depository, fully insured. Also, a lot of people have got money in IRAs, 401ks. It's where the bulk of our retirement sits. We can roll over any IRA or eligible 401k, no tax implications or penalties. We can place physical metals. Look, what I always tell our customers, you need to worry about being comfortable, making sure this is what you want to do. Once you're there, we can do all the heavy lifting.
That's phenomenal. And I think you hit, the nail right on the head there, because a lot of our audience members have their savings in 401ks, right? They have it in IRAs. And I guess speaking to that specific point, how does the process of moving that gold, or moving those vehicles into gold actually work? Is it complicated? Is it easy? Kind of like, what's the steps there for people to do so?
Great question. We try and make it as simple for our customers as possible. So once a customer says, listen, I've got this 401k, I want to move all or a portion of it, they can do whatever they like. We will connect them with a processor. They will fill out the necessary paperwork with the customer. They're going to send it to them to check over and sign. We'll include a return envelope, or it can be done digitally, and our IRA department will handle it from there. They'll contact the custodian. Funds will be rolled over directly, either 401k to IRA or IRA to IRA. No tax implications or penalties. For the customer, honestly, it's 15-minute appointment with the processor, get the paperwork done, and we handle it from there. So we try and make it simple.
I mean, it's too easy. At the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. And so, I don't know why anybody who has a 401k or an IRA would not want to do this. And then I guess the last question is, Philip, looking at potentially maybe storing some gold in your own safe, or having Birch hold on to it for you, for the safety advantages there, obviously. What is the advantage of holding physical gold?
It's a great question. So, look, a lot. And so I'm thinking where to start. So first of all, gold in general in this climate as an asset class, it's always been considered a safe haven or a secure asset. But in times like this, it grows because of the climate in front of us. So number one, the asset class itself is very secure. The question that you asked was why physical, though? And there's a lot of protection there. A lot of problem with paper assets. Sometimes they're over leveraged, right? Some paper versions of gold, if they've got an ounce of gold in a vault, they'll sell 30 or 100 ounces of paper versions on the back of it. When you buy a physical asset, that doesn't come into play. You own it. It's yours. We can't make more of it, right? It is what it is. Secondly, look in an IRA. When you hold paper assets, a lot of the time they sit on the balance sheet of an institution, right? Remember when SVB went down or Lehman Brothers went down? It was a problem for individuals. They had to go to the government and get the money back through the FDIC. With a physical asset, whether it's in a depository or obviously in your house, that risk doesn't exist. You're not dependent on us staying in business or anyone else. So there's an element of security when you own the physical asset that doesn't exist in leveraged paper versions.
That's powerful. And I think it's, such an important thing, especially for my viewers here, because they understand clearly, right? This fiat currency system that basically exists and runs the world, if you will. I mean, we're looking at the Federal Reserve. It's not federal. It has no reserves, and it especially doesn't have any gold reserves. And so at the end of the day, this is a way for people to take responsibility and really their finances into their own hands to preserve their wealth, their assets, and protect their future for their family. So look, if someone wants to learn more, what do they need to do to get the free info kit? And why is it so important to start right here, right now, Philip?
It is very simple. They text Vantes to 989898. That's going to get them access to free information. Everything we provide information-wise, it is free. We think if people can learn, get educated, the solutions are going to present themselves. And listen, you answered the why now earlier. 40% in the last 12 months, 25% this year. It's moving, and it's moving for the reasons you mentioned, right? It's deficits, it's debt, it's monetary issues, the Federal Reserve. By the way, I loved your line on the Federal Reserve. They're not federal and they don't have reserves. That's a great line. It's absolutely true. And listen, there's a reason that central banks around the world have been setting records for gold buying for the last 3.5 years. When it comes to currency, these guys issue currency. They are the canaries in the coal mine. They know that there is an issue. There is only so long you can spend 50% more than you bring in revenue. That's the position we are in as a country today. Long term, it is unsustainable. Currency suffers and gold performs.
Absolutely. And that's why I've been excited to have Birch Gold as a partner on this show and personally be able to take advantage of it for myself. Look, guys, they make this thing incredibly simple for you. They educate you first, and they're going to walk you through the entire process step by step. That's what I like, because you don't want somebody just grabbing you and basically shoving something in your face. You want somebody to show you how it actually works, and that's exactly what Birch Gold Group does. So do me a favor, chat. Everybody right now who's watching this, stop what you're doing. Pull out your cell phone, okay? Pull it out for just a quick second. Pull up your text app. And what you're going to do is you're going to text Vantes, VANTES, to the number 989898. And you should see it right down here on the lower bar. Text right now. And then I want you to put in the chat, I did it, to confirm that you did it, because I want you to be educated. I want you to get your free info kit. And I want you to know the power that comes behind a great partner like Birch Gold Group for your savings, for your investment vehicles, to make sure that you are secure and your money is going upward, not downward. Philip, thank you so much for joining us here on the Vantes Point here on LFA TV. We greatly appreciate you. And can we have you back again real soon here?
Whenever you want. It was a pleasure today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a great day. All right, guys, I wanted to share with you this clip of this documentary, continuing just to give you some more information and insight on what I've been seeing with respect to the money system. This is from the Money Masters. You guys have requested this, and so I want to share this clip with you as we cap off today's segment. Enjoy this, and thank you so much for watching the Vantes Point. Let's pop in right now.
Necessary. The next year, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1873, and the minting of silver dollars abruptly stopped. In fact, Representative Samuel Hooper, who introduced the bill in the House, acknowledged that Mr. Said actually drafted the legislation. But it gets even worse than that. In 1874, Said himself admitted who was behind the scheme.
I went to America in the winter of 1872-73, authorized to secure, if I could, the passage of a bill demonetizing silver. It was in the interest of those I represented, the governors of the Bank of England, to have it done. By 1873, gold coins were the only form of coin money.
But the contest over control of America's money was not yet over. Only 3 years later, in 1876, with 1/3 of America's workforce unemployed, the population was growing restless. People were clamoring for a return to the greenback money system of President Lincoln, or a return to silver money, anything that would make money more plentiful. That year, Congress created the United States Silver Commission to study the problem. Their report clearly blamed the monetary contraction on the national bankers. The report is interesting because it compares the deliberate money contraction by the national bankers after the Civil War to the fall of the Roman Empire.
The disaster of the Dark Ages was caused by decreasing money and falling prices. Without money, civilization could not have had a beginning, and with a diminishing supply, it must languish, and unless relieved, finally perish. At the Christian era, the metallic money of the Roman Empire amounted to $1,800,000,000. By the end of the 15th century, it had shrunk to less than $200 million. History records no other such disastrous transition as that from the Roman Empire to the Dark Ages.
Despite this report by the Silver Commission, Congress took no action. The next year, 1877, riots broke out from Pittsburgh to Chicago. The torches of starving vandals lit up the sky. The bankers huddled to decide what to do. They decided to hang on. Now that they were back in control to a certain extent, they were not about to give it up. At the meeting of the American Bankers Association that year, they urged their membership to do everything in their power to put down the notion of a return to greenbacks. The ABA Secretary, James Buell, authored a letter to the members which blatantly called on the banks to subvert not only Congress, but the press.
It is advisable to do all in your power to sustain such prominent daily and weekly newspapers, especially the agricultural and religious press, as will oppose the greenback issue of paper money, and that you will also withhold patronage from all applicants who are not willing to oppose the government issue of money. To repeal the act creating banknotes or to restore to circulation the government issue of money will be to provide the people with money and will therefore seriously affect our individual profits as bankers and lenders. See your congressman at once and engage him to support our interest that we may control legislation.
As political pressure mounted in Congress for change, the press tried to turn the American people away from the truth. The New York Tribune put it this way on January 10th, 1878. "The capital of the country is organized at last, and we will see whether Congress will dare to fly in its face." But it didn't work entirely. On February 28, 1878, Congress passed the Sherman Law, allowing the minting of a limited number of silver dollars, ending the 5-year hiatus. This did not end gold backing of the currency, however, nor did it completely free silver. Previous to 1873, anyone who brought silver to the U.S. Mint could have it struck into silver dollars free of charge. No longer. But at least some money began to flow back into the economy again. With no further threat to their control, the bankers loosened up on loans, and the post-Civil War depression was finally ended.
3 years later, the American people elected Republican James Garfield president. Garfield understood how the economy was being manipulated. As a congressman, he had been chairman of the Appropriations Committee and was a member of Banking and Currency. After his inauguration, he slammed the money changers publicly in 1881. Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled, one way or another, by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate.
Unfortunately, within a few weeks of making this statement, on July 2nd of 1881, President Garfield was assassinated. The money changers were gathering strength fast. They began a periodic fleecing of the flock, as they called it, by creating economic booms followed by further depressions so they could buy up thousands of homes and farms for pennies on the dollar. In 1891, the money changers prepared to take the American economy down again, and their methods and motives were laid out with shocking clarity in a memo sent out by the American Bankers Association, the ABA, an organization in which most bankers were members. Notice that this memo called for bankers to create a depression on a certain date 3 years in the future. According to the congressional record, here's how it read in part.
On September 1st, 1894, we will not renew our loans under any consideration. On September 1st, we will demand our money. We will foreclose and become mortgagees in possession. We can take 2/3 of the farms west of the Mississippi and thousands of them east of the Mississippi as well at our price. Then the farmers will become tenants, as in England.
These depressions could be controlled because America was on the gold money standard. Since gold is scarce, it's one of the easiest commodities to manipulate. People wanted silver money legalized again so they could escape the stranglehold the money changers had on gold money. People wanted silver money reinstated, reversing Mr. Said's Act of 1873, by then called the Crime of 73. By 1896, the issue of more silver money had become the central issue in the presidential campaign. William Jennings Bryan, a senator from Nebraska, ran for president as a Democrat on the free silver issue. At the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, he made an emotional speech which won him the nomination entitled Crown of Thorns and Cross of Gold. Though Bryan was only 36 years old at the time, this speech is widely regarded as the most famous oration ever made before a political convention. In the dramatic conclusion, Bryan said,
"We will answer their demand for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold."
The bankers lavishly supported the Republican candidate, William McKinley, who favored the gold standard. The resulting contest was amongst the most fiercely contested presidential races in American history. Bryan made over 600 speeches in 27 states. The McKinley campaign got manufacturers and industrialists to inform their employees that if Bryan were elected, all factories and plants would close and there would be no work. The ruse succeeded. McKinley beat Bryan by a small margin. Bryan ran for president again in 1900 and in 1908, but fell short each time. During the 1912 Democratic Convention, Bryan was a powerful figure who helped Woodrow Wilson win the nomination. When Wilson became president, he appointed Bryan as Secretary of State, but Bryan soon became disenchanted with the Wilson administration. Bryan served only 2 years in the Wilson administration before resigning in 1915 over the highly suspicious sinking of the Lusitania, the event which was used to drive America into World War I. Although William Jennings Bryan never gained the presidency, his efforts delayed the money changers for 17 years from attaining their next goal, a new, privately owned central bank for America. Now it was time for the money changers to get back to the business of a new private central bank for America. During the early 1900s, men like J.P. Morgan led the charge. One final panic would be necessary to focus the nation's attention on the supposed need for a central bank. The rationale was that only a central bank can prevent bank failures. Morgan was clearly the most powerful banker in America and a suspected agent for the Rothschilds. Morgan had helped finance John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil empire. He had also helped finance the monopolies of Edward Harriman in railroads, of Andrew Carnegie in steel, and of others in numerous industries. But on top of that, J.P. Morgan's father, Junius Morgan, had been America's financial agent to the British. After his father's death, J.P. Morgan took on a British partner, Edward Grenfell, a longtime director of the Bank of England. In fact, upon Morgan's death, his estate contained only a few $1 million. The bulk of the securities most people thought he owned were in fact owned by others. In 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt allegedly went after Morgan and his friends by using the Sherman Antitrust Act to try to break up their industrial monopolies. Actually, Roosevelt did very little to interfere in the growing monopolization of American industry by the bankers and their surrogates. For example, Roosevelt supposedly broke up the Standard Oil monopoly, but it wasn't really broken at all. It was merely divided into 7 corporations, all still controlled by the Rockefellers. The public was aware of this thanks to political cartoonists like Thomas Nast, who referred to the bankers as the Money Trust. By 1907, the year after Teddy Roosevelt's re-election, Morgan decided it was time to try for a central bank again. Using their combined financial muscle, Morgan and his friends were secretly able to crash the stock market. Thousands of small banks were vastly overextended. Some had reserves of less than 1% thanks to the fractional reserve principle. Within days, bank runs were commonplace across the nation. Now Morgan stepped into the public arena and offered to prop up the faltering American economy by supporting failing banks with money he manufactured out of nothing. It was an outrageous proposal, far worse than even fractional reserve banking, but Congress let him do it. Morgan manufactured $200 million worth of this completely reserveless private money and bought things with it, paid for services with it, and sent some of it to his branch banks to lend out at interest. His plan worked. Soon, the public regained confidence in money in general and quit hoarding their currency. But as a result, banking power was further consolidated into the hands of a few large banks. By 1908, the panic was over, and Morgan was hailed as a hero by the president of Princeton University, a man by the name of Woodrow Wilson.
All this trouble could be averted if we appointed a committee of 6 or 7 public-spirited men like J.P. Morgan to handle the affairs of our country.
Economics textbooks would later explain that the creation of the Federal Reserve System was the direct result of the panic of 1907. Quote, "With its alarming epidemic of bank failures, the country was fed up once and for all with the anarchy of unstable private banking." Close quote. But Minnesota Congressman Charles A. Lindbergh Sr., the father of the famous aviator Lucky Lindy, later explained that the panic of 1907 was really just a scam.
Those not favorable to the money trust could be squeezed out of business and the people frightened into demanding changes in the banking and currency laws which the money trust would frame.
So, since the passage of the National Bank Act of 1863, the money changers had been able to create a series of booms and busts. The purpose was not only to fleece the American public of their property, but to later claim that the banking system was basically so unstable that it had to be consolidated into a central bank once again. After the crash, Teddy Roosevelt, in response to the panic of 1907, signed into law a bill creating something called the National Monetary Commission. The commission was to study the banking problem and make recommendations to Congress. Of course, the commission was packed with Morgan's friends and cronies. The chairman was a man named Senator Nelson Aldrich from Rhode Island. Aldrich represented the Newport, Rhode Island homes of America's richest banking families. His daughter married John D. Rockefeller, Jr., and together they had 5 sons: John, Nelson, who would become vice president in 1974, Lawrence, Winthrop, and David, the head of the Council on Foreign Relations and former chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank. As soon as the National Monetary Commission was set up, Senator Aldrich immediately embarked on a 2-year tour of Europe, where he consulted at length with the private central bankers in England, France, and Germany. The total cost of his trip alone to the taxpayers was $300,000, an astronomical sum in those days. Shortly after his return, on the evening of November 22, 1910, some of the wealthiest and most powerful men in America boarded Senator Aldrich's private rail car and in the strictest secrecy journeyed to this place, Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. With the group came Paul Warburg. Warburg had been given a $500,000 per year salary to lobby for the passage of a privately owned central bank in America by the investment firm Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Warburg's partner in this firm was a man named Jacob Schiff, the grandson of the man who shared the Green Shield house with the Rothschild family in Frankfurt. Schiff, as we'll find out later, was in the process of spending $20 million to finance the overthrow of the Tsar in Russia. These 3 European banking families, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, and the Schiffs, were interconnected by marriage down through the years, just as their American banking counterparts, the Morgans, Rockefellers, and Aldriches were. Secrecy was so tight that all 7 primary participants were cautioned to use only first names to prevent servants from learning their identities. Years later, one participant, Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank of New York and a representative of the Rockefeller family, confirmed the Jekyll Island trip in a February 9, 1935 edition of the Saturday Evening Post.
I was as secretive, indeed as furtive as any conspirator. Discovery, we knew, simply must not happen, or else all our time and effort would be wasted. If it were to be exposed that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have no chance whatever of passage by Congress.
The participants came here to figure out how to solve their major problem, how to bring back a privately owned central bank. But there were other problems that needed to be addressed as well. First of all, the market share of the big national banks was shrinking fast. In the first 10 years of the century, the number of U.S. banks had more than doubled to over 20,000. By 1913, only 29% of all banks were national banks, and they held only 57% of all deposits. As Senator Aldrich later admitted in a magazine article,
before passage of this act, the New York bankers could only dominate the reserves of New York. Now, we are able to dominate the bank reserves of the entire country.
Therefore, something had to be done to bring these new banks under their control. As John D. Rockefeller put it, quote,
competition is sin, close quote. Secondly, the nation's economy was so strong that corporations were starting to finance their expansions out of profits instead of taking out huge loans from large banks. In the first 10 years of the new century, 70% of corporate funding came from profits. In other words, American industry was becoming independent of the money changers, and that trend had to be stopped. All the participants knew that these problems could be hammered out into a workable solution, but perhaps their biggest problem was a public relations problem, the name of the new bank. That discussion took place right here in this room, one of the many conference rooms in this sprawling hotel, today known as the Jekyll Island Club Hotel. Aldrich believed that the word bank should not even appear in the name. Warburg wanted to call the legislation the National Reserve Bill or the Federal Reserve Bill. The idea here was to give the impression that the purpose of the new central bank was to stop bank runs, but also to conceal its monopoly character. However, it was Aldrich, the egotistical politician, who insisted it be called the Aldrich Bill. After 9 days at Jekyll Island, the group dispersed. The new central bank would be very similar to the old Bank of the United States. It would be given a monopoly over U.S. currency and create that money out of nothing. How does the Fed create money out of nothing? It's a four-step process. But first, a word on bonds. Bonds are simply promises to pay, or government IOUs. People buy bonds to get a secure rate of interest. At the end of the term of the bond, the government repays the bond plus interest, and the bond is destroyed. There are about $3.6 trillion worth of these loans or bonds at present. Now here's the Fed money-making process. Step 1. The Federal Open Market Committee approves the purchase of U.S. bonds on the open market. Step 2. The bonds are purchased by the Fed from whoever is offering them for sale on the open market. Step 3. The Fed pays for the bonds with electronic credits to the seller's bank, which in turn credits the seller's bank account. The trick is that these credits are based on nothing. The Fed just creates them. Step 4. The banks use these deposits as reserves. They can loan out over 10 times the amount of their reserves to new borrowers, all at interest. In this way, a Fed purchase of, say, $1 million worth of bonds gets turned into over $10 million in bank accounts. The Fed, in effect, creates 10% of this totally new money, and the banks create the other 90%. To reduce the amount of money in the economy, the process is just reversed. The Fed sells bonds to the